I was 8 years old when my mother told me to go to the bathroom fast, that she'd wait right there in our blue minivan. 10 minutes later, I stood alone in a highway rest stop parking lot, watching empty roads stretch in both directions. That day taught me how quickly everything can vanish. Trust, security, childhood, all gone in the time it takes to choose between potato chips and chocolate cookies. They say trauma rewires the brain. Mine was rewired to believe that love means watching taillights disappear, that family is something that drives away while you're not looking. What my mother couldn't have known when she left me there was that abandonment doesn't end a story. Sometimes, it's just the beginning. I never thought I'd be telling this story. Even now, at 32, my hands shake as I type these words. But some stories need to be told, even the ones that break your heart to remember. That summer, when I was 8, Mom packed our blue minivan for what she called our grand Kentucky adventure. We were headed to Grandma Elsie's place, a trip that always made Mom's eyes sparkle with something I couldn't quite name. Looking back, I wonder if it was desperation. Just us girls on the open road, Mom said, tossing her chestnut hair over her shoulder as she stuffed my yellow backpack behind the passenger seat. We're going to have the best time, Ivy girl. Mom was beautiful in that way that made strangers stop and stare, bright, with a laugh that burst out of nowhere like summer fireworks. She could make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs and knew all the words to every song on the radio. But there were days when the light went out of her, when she'd stay in bed until afternoon with the curtains drawn, or when she'd scrub the kitchen floor at 3 a.m. because she just couldn't sleep with all this filth. Dad had been gone for 2 years by then. One morning he was there, making coffee in his blue robe, and the next day, his side of the closet was empty. Mom rarely talked about him, and when she did, her voice took on a sharp edge that made me shrink into myself. He chose his freedom over his family, she'd say, mouth tight at the corners. But we don't need him, do we, Ivy? I always shook my head, even though I missed the way Dad used to push me on the swing, so high I felt like I was flying. We'd been driving for almost 6 hours when Mom pulled into the rest stop. It was one of those places that seemed to exist in their own pocket of time, a small building with vending machines, surrounded by picnic tables and scraggly trees trying their best to provide shade. The parking lot was nearly empty except for a semi-truck and a couple of dusty sedans. "Go quick, honey," Mom said, smiling as she dug through her purse. Her nails were painted coral that week, and they flashed like tiny flags as she handed me a $5 bill. "We'll wait right here. We're ahead of schedule." I remember how the sun fell on my shoulders as I skipped toward the building, how the automatic doors whooshed open with a blast of air conditioning that made me shiver. Inside, I spent too long deciding between potato chips and chocolate cookies, finally choosing both. The bathroom was clean but smelled strongly of lemon cleaner, and I sang "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" while I washed my hands because that's what Mom taught me to do to make sure I washed long enough. When I pushed through the glass doors back into the sunshine, our blue van was gone. At first, I thought I was looking in the wrong spot. I walked up and down the row of parking spaces, certain I'd just forgotten where we'd parked. Then I checked behind the building, thinking maybe Mom had moved the van for some reason. With each step, my heart beat faster, my breath coming in short bursts that made my chest hurt. "Mom," I called out, my voice small in the vast parking lot. "Mom." I ran to the picnic area, ducking under tables and peering behind trash cans. Maybe this was a game, like the hide-and-seek we sometimes played at the park. But Mom always counted to 10 before looking for me, and I always heard her calling my name, getting closer and closer until she found me. This time, there was only silence, broken by the occasional rumble of a passing truck on the highway. I even tried opening the doors of other cars, thinking maybe ours had been towed, and Mom was waiting in a different vehicle. A man yelled at me when I tugged on his truck door, and I ran back toward the building, tears streaming down my face. Inside, I approached the cashier, a woman with tired eyes and hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. "My mom's gone," I said, the words catching in my throat. "Our van was here, and now it's not." The woman frowned, setting down her magazine. "Wait, your mom drove off. Without you?" I nodded, unable to speak through the lump in my throat. "She made a call. her voice low as she glanced at me with an expression I couldn't read. When she hung up, she came around the counter and led me to a small break room in the back. "The police are coming, sweetie. They'll help find your mom. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." But as she turned to get me a cup of water, I heard her mutter to another employee, "That's the third time this month someone's left a kid here." The words fell like stones into the pit of my stomach. Not an accident. Not a misunderstanding. My mom had left me. On purpose. I sat on a plastic chair, clutching my backpack to my chest, as people came and went, their voices blending into a buzz around me. They asked questions I couldn't answer. My address, my phone number, my mom's full name. All I could think about was the smile on Mom's face as she said, "We'll wait right here."
A lie.
It had been a lie. When the police arrived, they were kind but businesslike. One officer, a woman with short blonde hair, knelt in front of me and spoke in a gentle voice. "We're going to find your mom, Ivy. But for now, we need to take you somewhere safe." I don't remember much about the ride to the police station, just the way the trees blurred outside the window and how the seatbelt felt too tight across my chest. At some point, someone found a torn school ID in my backpack with my name, Ivy Caldwell, and the name of my school. Not my address. Not enough. As the sky darkened outside the station windows, I kept waiting for the sound of tires on gravel, for Mom to burst through the doors with wild explanations and tearful apologies. But the night grew deeper, and she never came. The first night away from Mom, I slept in a small room at a children's shelter. The bed had a pink-flowered comforter that smelled like laundry detergent, not like Mom's perfume. I kept my shoes on all night, certain that any minute the door would open and Mom would be there saying, "Let's go, Ivy girl. Sorry for the mix-up." By morning, my shoes had made dirt marks on the sheets, but Mom hadn't come. 2 days later, I was placed with June Beckett, a foster mother with silver-streaked brown hair and hands that never seemed to stay still. Her house was neat and small, with a garden in the back where hummingbirds hovered around bright red feeders. "This is temporary," June explained as she showed me to a bedroom with pale blue walls and a bookshelf filled with children's novels. "Until we figure things out with your mom." I nodded, though I didn't understand what there was to figure out. Mom had made a mistake. She would come back for me. Each morning, I woke up thinking today would be the day. Each night, I lay awake watching headlights pass across the ceiling, certain that every set belonged to our blue van pulling into the driveway. In my dreams, I was always running after the van, my feet too slow, my voice too quiet to make Mom stop and turn around. On my 5th day with June, a social worker named Mr. Collier came to see me. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and spoke to me like I was older than 8. "Ivy," he said, sitting beside me on the porch swing, "we've managed to contact your mother." My heart leapt. "She's coming to get me?" The pause before his answer told me everything. "No, Ivy."
I'm sorry.
She's not coming." "But she has to," I insisted, my voice rising. "She's my mom. She wouldn't just leave me." Mr. Collier placed his hand gently on my shoulder. "Sometimes adults make choices that are hard for us to understand. Your mom told us she's not able to come for you right now." I pulled away from him, anger burning behind my eyes. "You're lying." She wouldn't say that. But even as the words left my mouth, I remembered the cashier's comment, "The third time this month," and a cold feeling spread through my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I crept down the hallway past midnight, drawn by the sound of June's voice. She was on the phone in the kitchen, her back to the doorway. "I know, but this case is different," she was saying. "The mother actually spoke to Jason, our social worker, and just refused." A pause. "She just said, I need it out. She'll be better off." Can you believe that? No explanation. No timeline for coming back. Nothing. I must have made a sound, because June turned suddenly, her face falling when she saw me. She ended the call quickly and came to kneel in front of me. "Oh, Ivy, honey, you shouldn't have heard that." But I had, and the words echoed in my head as June led me back to bed. "I need it out. She'll be better off." Not I made a mistake. Not "I'm coming back." Just out. Like I was a room she could walk out of and close the door behind her. In the days that followed, I moved through a fog. June enrolled me in the local school, buying me new clothes and a purple backpack when it became clear my old one wasn't enough. I went through the motions, raising my hand when called on, eating lunch in the noisy cafeteria, playing half-heartedly on the swings at recess. It was during lunch, about 2 weeks after I arrived, that I met Declan Taylor. He had freckles across his nose and a gap between his front teeth that showed when he smiled. He sat down across from me and pushed his chocolate milk toward me. "You don't talk much," he observed. I didn't either, when I first came. I stared at him. "Came where?" "To foster care." He said it matter-of-factly, like it was normal. "My mom left when I was 6. Just packed a suitcase and walked out during Sesame Street. Haven't seen her since." Something in my chest loosened at his words. Here was someone who understood. "My mom left me at a rest stop," I confessed, the words feeling strange in my mouth. It was the first time I'd said it out loud. Declan nodded, unsurprised. "Adults do weird stuff sometimes. My foster mom says it's not about us, but I think that's just something they say." "Why would she leave me there?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me since that day. Declan shrugged, taking a bite of his sandwich. "Sometimes they think we're just in their way." "In the way of what?" "Whatever they really want to be doing, I guess." He looked at me with a wisdom no 9-year-old should have. "My mom left a note saying she needed to find herself. Like she lost herself somewhere in our apartment." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Declan had said. Was I in Mom's way? Had she been looking for a chance to get rid of me? The thought made me sick to my stomach. After June had gone to bed, I slipped out of the house, taking only my backpack and the $5 bill I still had from that day. I didn't know where I was going until I was already walking along the highway, my small flashlight casting a weak beam in the darkness. I was going back to the rest stop. Because maybe, just maybe, Mom would return there looking for me. I didn't make it, of course. A highway patrol car spotted me less than a mile from June's house. The officer, a man with a deep voice and gentle hands, radioed June before taking me back. She was waiting on the porch, her face tight with worry. "Don't you ever do that again," she said, hugging me so hard it hurt. "Do you understand me, Ivy?" "Never." I nodded against her shoulder, shame and disappointment washing over me in equal measure. June wasn't angry, though, just scared. Later, as she tucked me into bed for the second time that night, she noticed my backpack on the floor where I'd dropped it. "What's that?" she asked, pointing to a white corner peeking out from the front pocket. I shrugged. I hadn't put anything there. June carefully pulled out a folded envelope, slightly crumpled but still sealed. On the front, in neat blue ink, was my name, Ivy Caldwell. The return address was for someone named Ethan Caldwell in Burlington, Vermont. "Do you know who this is?" June asked, handing me the envelope. I shook my head, turning it over in my hands. The name was familiar, but I couldn't place it. The handwriting wasn't Mom's loopy scrawl. "We'll ask Mr. Collier about it tomorrow," June said, but I barely heard her. Because suddenly, I remembered where I'd heard the name Ethan before. It was my father's name. The envelope sat on my nightstand for 3 days before I worked up the courage to open it. Mr. Collier had confirmed what I already suspected. Ethan Caldwell was my father, and this letter had been in my backpack since before the rest stop. Maybe even since before we left home. "Would you like me to read it first?" June offered, sitting on the edge of my bed. I shook my head, tearing open the flap with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly in thirds. "Dear Ivy, I hope this letter finds you well. I've written to the address I have for you many times, but I never hear back. I don't know if you're getting my letters, or if your mother is keeping them from you. I want you to know that I think about you every day. I have a picture of you on my desk, from your 5th birthday. You're wearing a purple dress with butterflies. If you get this, and if you want to, you can write to me at the address on the envelope. I would love to hear from you. Love always, Dad." The letter was dated 4 months ago. I read it 3 times, trying to make sense of the words. Dad had been writing to me? I'd never received a single letter. And the picture he mentioned, I remembered that dress, remembered Mom zipping it up the back and telling me I looked like a princess. June, I said slowly. I think my mom lied to me. About my dad. June's expression was careful. What did she tell you about him? That he left because he didn't want to be with us anymore. That he never tried to contact us. June took the letter gently from my hands. Would you like to write back to him? I nodded, suddenly desperate to know more. With June and Mr. Collier's help, I composed a letter to this stranger, who was my father. I told him what had happened, about the rest stop, about June's house, about how Mom had left me. Asked if he really had written other letters, and why he hadn't visited if he missed me so much. 3 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived with a Vermont postmark. This time, I tore it open immediately. Inside were several pages covered in a slanted handwriting, along with a handful of photographs. In one, a tall man with sandy hair held a toddler on his shoulders, me, I realized with a shock. In another, the same man sat on a couch beside a much younger version of my mother, both of them smiling at the camera. Dear Ivy, I can't tell you how shocked and worried I was to get your letter. Your mother told me you two had moved to California after the divorce. She said you needed a fresh start, away from the memories. I've been sending letters to an address in Sacramento for the past 2 years, never understanding why I didn't hear back. I had no idea you were still in Tennessee, and I'm horrified to learn about what happened at the rest stop. I've been in touch with your social worker, Mr. Collier, and I'm planning to fly down next week to see you. If that's okay with you. To answer your questions, yes, I've written dozens of letters. And I tried to visit many times after the divorce, but your mother always had reasons why it wasn't a good time. Eventually, she got a restraining order, claiming I was harassing her. I fought it in court, but by the time it was resolved, she told me you had moved away. I never wanted to leave you, Ivy. Please believe that. I'll see you soon, Dad, Ethan. The letter left me with more questions than answers. I showed it to June, who read it with a deepening frown. This is very serious, she said finally. It sounds like your mother may have deliberately kept you from your father. A week later, Ethan Caldwell arrived at June's house. I watched from the window as he got out of a rental car, tall and broad-shouldered, with the same sandy hair from the photos, though now streaked with gray at the temples. My stomach twisted with a mix of excitement and fear. Our first meeting was awkward. We sat in June's living room, Mr. Collier present as a supervisor, and stared at each other across the coffee table. You've grown so much, Ethan said, his voice deeper than I'd imagined. Last time I saw you, you barely came up to my knee. When was that? I asked. The last time? His smile faltered. Your 5th birthday. I brought you a stuffed elephant. You named it Peanut. I remembered Peanut. He was still on my bed at home, or what used to be home. Mom had told me the elephant came from Grandma Elsie. Do you remember? Ethan asked. I shook my head. Mom said I haven't seen you since I was 3. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not true, Ivy. I visited whenever your mother would allow it, which wasn't often. But I was there for your 4th Christmas, your 5th birthday, and even the first day of kindergarten. I have pictures. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos that proved what he was saying. There I was, sitting on his lap opening Christmas presents. There I was, holding his hand in front of a school building, wearing a backpack that looked enormous on my small frame. I don't understand, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. Why would Mom lie? Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Your mother and our relationship was complicated. She was always afraid I would try to take you away from her. The more I fought to see you, the more she pulled away. So you gave up? The words came out harsher than I intended.
No, Ivy.
Ethan leaned forward, his eyes intense. I never gave up. I filed for joint custody after the divorce, but your mother fought it every step of the way. She moved 3 times in 2 years, making it hard for the court to establish jurisdiction. When she told me you'd moved to California, I hired a private investigator to find you, but he came back empty-handed. The revelations hit me like physical blows. All this time, I'd believed my father had abandoned me. But it was Mom who had been keeping us apart. Over the next few weeks, Ethan visited regularly. He was staying at a nearby hotel, while his lawyer worked with Mr. Collier on custody arrangements. It was strange getting to know this man who was both familiar and a complete stranger. He liked black coffee and sci-fi movies. He taught high school history in Burlington. He had a house with a yard and a dog named Cooper. "Would you like to come live with me?" he asked one afternoon as we walked around June's garden. "Once all the paperwork is sorted out, I mean." I considered the question. I barely knew this man, but he was my father.
And he wanted me.
Unlike Mom. "I think so," I said finally. "But what about Mom? Doesn't she get a say?" Ethan's expression darkened. "Your mother abandoned you, Ivy. That changes things legally. But yes, technically she still has parental rights unless she agrees to give them up." It took months of legal wrangling. Mom refused to sign over custody, despite what she'd done. She wouldn't come to see me, wouldn't talk to me on the phone, but still clung to the idea that she was my mother. It made no sense. Then, almost 6 months after the day at the rest stop, a package arrived for me at June's house. Inside was a photo album with a note in Mom's handwriting. "You deserve better. I was never built for this." The album was filled with pictures of me growing up, birthday parties, first days of school, Halloween costumes. But mixed in were photos I'd never seen before, of people I didn't recognize. In one, a woman in a blue nursing uniform held a baby that must have been me, smiling proudly at the camera. "Who's that?" I asked Ethan when he came for his daily visit. He took the photo, his expression softening. "That's your real grandma. My mom, Nancy. She passed away when you were 4. I stared at him in shock. "But I've never met her." "You did," Ethan said gently. "Many times. She adored you. She used to babysit you when you were little before the divorce." Another lie. Mom had always told me my only grandparents were Grandma Elsie and Grandpa Tom, her parents. She'd never mentioned Ethan's family. "There's more," Ethan said, turning the pages of the album. "I have an older brother, your Uncle Jack. And he has 2 kids about your age, your cousins, Lily and Max." With each revelation, my understanding of my life shifted. It wasn't just that Mom had abandoned me at a rest stop. She'd been erasing pieces of my history for years, cutting me off from half my family. Why would she do this? I asked, closing the album with trembling hands. Ethan sighed. "I wish I had a simple answer. Your mother, she's always struggled with her mental health. After you were born, she had severe postpartum depression. She got better, but there were always ups and downs." It made a twisted kind of sense. The mom who made dinosaur pancakes and sang at the top of her lungs was the same mom who sometimes stayed in bed for days or scrubbed floors in the middle of the night. The same mom who smiled and said, "We'll wait right here," before driving away forever. 3 days after the package arrived, Mr. Collier came to June's house with news. Sabrina had finally signed the paperwork giving up her parental rights. Ethan would have full custody. "Does this mean I never have to see her again?" I asked, unsure whether the hollowness in my chest was relief or grief. "That's up to you," Mr. Collier said kindly. "But right now, the focus is on getting you settled with your dad." As we packed my few belongings, the clothes June had bought me, the books I'd collected during my stay, the photo album for Mom, I found myself thinking about that day at the rest stop. The taste of sunshine and fear. The echo of Mom's promise, "We'll wait right here." Some promises aren't meant to be kept. But as I folded the last shirt into my suitcase, I made a promise to myself. I would find the truth in all the lies I'd been told. Someday, I would understand why my mother drove away that day. Not to forgive her, but to free myself from the question that still haunted my dreams. What did I do wrong? The answer, I was beginning to suspect, was nothing at all. 7 years passed like water flowing under a bridge, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but always moving forward. At 15, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror in Burlington, Vermont, barely recognizing the person I had become. My hair was longer now, my face losing its childhood roundness. Dad, I could call him that easily now, said I looked like my grandmother Nancy, especially when I smiled. "Ivy," Rachel called from downstairs. You're going to be late for therapy. I grabbed my journal and backpack, thundering down the stairs of our two-story colonial. The house was nothing like the apartment Mom and I had shared. This place had garden beds bursting with flowers in summer, a tree swing in the backyard, and family photos lining every hallway.
Photos that included me.
Rachel waited by the door, car keys dangling from her fingers. My stepmother of 3 years had the patience of a saint and never tried to replace my mother, something I appreciated more than I could express. Sorry, I mumbled, sliding into my sneakers. Lost track of time. Journaling again? Rachel asked as we walked to the car. I nodded, clutching the leather-bound book to my chest. Dr. Palmer, my therapist, had suggested I write down my memories, feelings, and questions. The journal had become my constant companion, filled with fragments of my past and present, attempts to make sense of both. The drive to Dr. Palmer's office was quiet. Rachel never pushed me to talk, which was one of the reasons we had slowly grown close. Unlike the string of counselors and social workers from my first year with Dad, she never treated me like a puzzle to be solved. I'll pick you up in an hour, she said as I got out of the car. Maybe we can get ice cream after? I smiled and nodded, appreciating the normalcy of the offer. Ice cream after therapy had become our ritual, a sweet counterbalance to the often bitter memories I unpacked in Dr. Palmer's office. Inside, Dr. Palmer's calm voice guided our session, as usual. How have you been sleeping, Ivy? Better, I admitted. Only one nightmare this week. The same one? I nodded. The rest stop dream never fully disappeared. In it, I was still 8 years old, running after our blue van as it drove away, my legs moving in slow motion like I was wading through water. And how are things at home? With your father and Rachel? This was harder to answer. Not because things were bad, quite the opposite. Life with Dad and Rachel was stable, predictable, safe. And that was exactly what made it so difficult sometimes. They want to adopt a baby, I said finally. Rachel can't have kids, and they've been talking to an adoption agency. How do you feel about that? I shrugged, picking at a loose thread on my jeans.
Fine, I guess.
I mean, they're great parents. They deserve a kid who isn't broken. Dr. Palmer's expression remained neutral, but her eyes softened. Do you think you're broken, Ivy? Wouldn't you be? The words came out sharper than I intended. My own mother didn't want me. She drove away and never looked back. And then I find out she'd been lying about my dad for years, keeping me away from his whole family. So, yeah, sometimes I feel pretty broken. That's understandable, Dr. Palmer said. But I want you to remember something important. What happened to you doesn't define who you are. Your mother's choices were about her, not about you. I'd heard this before from Dad, from Rachel, from every therapist I'd seen since the rest stop. Sometimes I even believed it. After therapy, Rachel and I got ice cream as promised. As we sat at a picnic table overlooking Lake Champlain, my phone buzzed with a notification. A message from Declan Taylor, my friend from that brief time in foster care. We'd reconnected through social media last year and kept in sporadic contact ever since. Who's that? Rachel asked, noticing my smile. Just Declan, I said, typing a quick reply. He got accepted to his first-choice college. Full scholarship. Rachel nodded approvingly. That's wonderful. He's the friend who is also in foster care, right?
Yeah.
He got adopted by a really nice family when he was 10. They moved to Maine. I hesitated, then added, we talk a lot about, being left. What it does to you. Rachel was quiet for a moment, licking her ice cream cone thoughtfully. Does it help? Talking to someone who understands firsthand. Sometimes it's the only thing that helps, I admitted. Dad and you try so hard and I love you for it. But Declan just gets it without me having to explain. That night, Declan and I video chatted for nearly 2 hours. He looked different from the gap-toothed 9-year-old I remembered, taller, with his freckles faded and his voice deeper. But his laugh was the same, and so was the way he didn't flinch from the hard truths. My college essay was about my mom leaving, he told me. I think that's why I got the scholarship. They're suckers for a good trauma story. I laughed despite myself. So, there's an upside to abandonment? College money. Take the wins where you can get them, he said with a shrug. What about you? Ever write about what happened? I hesitated, then reached for my journal. Actually, I have. My English teacher entered one of my essays in a contest, without telling me. It won first place in the state. No way. What's it called? The Day My Mother Vanished, I said, the title still feeling strange on my tongue. It's being published in the local paper next week. Ivy, that's huge. Declan's face lit up with genuine pride. You're going to send me a copy, right? I promised I would, though part of me was nervous about putting my story out there for strangers to read. The essay didn't tell everything. How could it? But it revealed enough of my heart to make me feel exposed. The publication date came and went. My teacher beamed when she handed me a framed copy of the newspaper page. Dad and Rachel took me out to dinner to celebrate. For a week, people looked at me differently at school, with curiosity or pity or something in between. Then, 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name written in familiar loopy handwriting. You don't have to read it, Dad said, his face tight with concern as he handed me the envelope. But I did. Alone in my room, I carefully opened it to find a single sheet of paper. Dear Ivy, I read your essay.
Someone sent it to me.
You write beautifully. I always knew you would. You were always making up stories, even when you were tiny. I'm not writing to defend myself or ask for forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable, and I know that. I just wanted you to know that I've read your words and I understand your pain because I caused it. I was a broken daughter trying to be a whole mother. I failed. You deserved better than what I could give you. You always did. Sabrina. Not Mom. Just Sabrina. As if she'd surrendered that title along with custody. I stared at the letter until the words blurred, unsure what I was feeling. Anger? Relief? Disappointment? After all these years, this was all she had to say? When Rachel knocked on my door to call me for dinner, she found me sitting cross-legged on my bed, surrounded by old photos and journals. The letter? She asked, sitting beside me. I nodded, handing it to her. As she read, I watched her face carefully. Rachel never spoke ill of my mother, never tried to vilify her or erase her from my life. What are you thinking? She asked when she finished reading. I don't know what to feel, I admitted. Part of me wants to write back and tell her exactly how much she hurt me. Part of me never wants to think about her again. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then said, You don't have to decide right now. Or ever really. This is your journey, Ivy. There's no right or wrong way to handle it. I thought about that for days. What did I want from Sabrina? An explanation? An apology? For her to hurt the way I had hurt? In the end, I wrote back a single word on a blank sheet of paper. Why? The response came not in a letter, but in an official envelope from the state of Tennessee. Inside was a legal document, a petition for the correction of a birth certificate. My birth certificate. The amendment changed my surname from Caldwell to Ashcroft. Ashcroft. Dad frowned, studying the document. That was Sabrina's maiden name. Why would she do this now? I asked. Dad shook his head. I don't know, Ivy, but it feels like she's erasing the last connection between us. I finished for him. The birth certificate correction felt like a final door closing. Sabrina Ashcroft had walked out of my life at that rest stop 7 years ago, and now she was legally removing the one thing that still tied us together, our shared name. That night, I dreamed of the rest stop again. But this time, I didn't chase after the van. I stood still, watching it disappear down the highway, and then I turned and walked in the opposite direction. On my 18th birthday, Dad and Rachel gave me a car, a used blue Honda that had been meticulously checked for safety. Along with the keys came an envelope containing $5,000. For college, Dad explained. Or whatever you decide to do next. I had been accepted to 3 schools, but hadn't committed to any of them yet. There was something I needed to do first, something I'd been planning for months. I want to find her, I told them over birthday cake that evening. Sabrina. I need to see her, just once. The silence that followed wasn't surprised or disapproving. They'd known this day might come. Are you sure? Dad asked finally. After everything? I nodded. Not for reconciliation. I just need answers. Real ones, not whatever she thinks will make her feel better about what she did. Then we'll help you, Rachel said, reaching for my hand. However we can. The last address we had for Sabrina was from the birth certificate amendment, a small town in Arkansas. That summer, after graduation, I packed a duffel bag into my Honda and began the long drive south. Dad had wanted to come with me, but I needed to do this alone. The town was smaller than I expected. One main street lined with storefronts that had seen better days, surrounded by neighborhoods of modest homes and apartment buildings. Sabrina's address led me to a 3-story brick apartment complex called Riverside Manor, though there wasn't a river in sight. I sat in my car across the street for nearly an hour, working up the courage to go inside. What would I say if I saw her? What if she refused to talk to me? What if she wasn't even there anymore? Finally, I crossed the street and entered the building. No security desk, just a directory of names beside a row of mailboxes. Ashcroft wasn't listed. Looking for someone? I turned to find an elderly man with a small dog on a leash watching me curiously. I'm looking for Sabrina Ashcroft, I said. She might have lived here recently. The man shook his head. Don't know an Ashcroft. Been here 15 years. Know most everybody. My heart sank. Another dead end. But as I turned to leave, a woman coming down the stairs stopped suddenly. Did you say Sabrina? She asked. Tall woman, brown hair, keeps to herself. I nodded eagerly. That's her. She used to live here. She still does, the woman said. 3rd floor, apartment 3C. But she goes by Wilson now, not Ashcroft. Works nights at the diner down on Main. Wilson. Another name change. It seemed Sabrina was constantly shedding identities like old coats. Does she live alone? I asked. The woman shrugged. Far as I know. Never seen anybody else coming or going. She's quiet. Doesn't talk to nobody much. I thanked her and left, my mind racing. Sabrina was here just upstairs, but it was only 2 in the afternoon. If she worked nights, she might be sleeping. Or maybe she was out. Either way, I needed time to process. I checked into a motel on the edge of town, splashing cold water on my face as I tried to calm my nerves. Then I drove to Main Street and found the diner, a chrome and neon establishment called that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1950s. Sabrina Wilson? The hostess confirmed when I asked. Yeah, she works here. Night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Been here about 3 years now. 3 years. While I was starting high school in Vermont, learning to drive, applying to colleges, Sabrina had been here serving coffee in the middle of the night. I spent the rest of the day driving aimlessly around town, trying to imagine my mother's life here. It was nothing like the suburban neighborhood where we'd lived in Tennessee, or the Kentucky hometown she'd talked about visiting the day she left me. What had brought her to this place? What kept her here? At 11:30 that night, I returned to Dots. The dinner crowd had thinned, leaving just a few truckers at the counter and a couple in a corner booth. And there she was, Sabrina, moving between tables with a coffee pot, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked older than I remembered, with fine lines around her eyes and mouth. Thinner, too. But the way she moved was the same, that restless energy I'd inherited from her. I slid into a booth in the back, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. When she approached with a menu, her gaze was tired and impersonal. Coffee? She asked, not really looking at me. Yes, please, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She poured the cup and started to move away. Sabrina, I said quietly. She froze, then slowly turned back. Her eyes met mine, confusion giving way to shock, and then something like fear. Ivy, she whispered, the coffee pot trembling in her hand. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I'll be right back, she said, her voice wooden. She walked quickly to the kitchen, disappearing through the swinging doors. For a terrible moment, I thought she might flee out the back door. But minutes later, she returned, sliding into the booth across from me. Her hands were shaking as she placed them flat on the table. You're all grown up, she said, her eyes moving over my face like she was memorizing it. You look good.
I am good, I said.
No thanks to you. She flinched but didn't protest. Your father? He's taking care of you. Dad and Rachel, my stepmom, they're great. I took a sip of coffee to steady myself. They're the ones who taught me what parents are supposed to be. Sabrina nodded, her eyes dropping to the table. I'm glad. You deserve that. What I deserved was a mother who didn't abandon me at a rest stop, I said, the words sharp with years of stored pain. What I deserved was the truth about my father and my grandmother and all the family you kept from me. You're right. Her voice was barely audible. I can't defend what I did. Then explain it, I demanded. I didn't drive all this way for an apology. I want to know why. Sabrina was quiet for so long, I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. I was terrified of becoming my mother, she said. My whole life, I watched her disappear, into bottles, into men's arms, into her own darkness. She'd vanish for days, sometimes weeks. I practically raised my little brother from the time I was 10. She twisted a paper napkin between her fingers, shredding it slowly. When I had you, I swore I'd be different. But then the depression hit. The panic attacks. The days when I couldn't get out of bed. And I'd look at you so perfect, so trusting, and I'd think, I'm going to ruin her. Just like my mother ruined me. So you just left me? That was your solution. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. I was unraveling, Sabrina said, meeting my eyes. That day, on the way to my mother's house, I had this moment of clarity. I realized I was driving you toward the same cycle of damage that shaped me. And I thought, God, it sounds so twisted now. I thought leaving you would save you. From what? From you. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. From becoming me. From learning to expect disappointment, to accept chaos as normal, to believe that love always comes with conditions. I let her words sink in, remembering the mood swings, the unpredictable bursts of energy followed by days of lethargy. Signs I was too young to recognize. You could have gotten help, I said finally. You could have asked Dad to take me while you got treatment. Ethan. She sighed. I convinced myself he was the enemy, that he would take you away if he knew how broken I was. It was easier to keep him away than to admit I was failing. And now, I gestured around the diner. What is this? Your penance. This is my life, she said simply. Small, quiet, manageable. I take my medication. I see a therapist. I work nights because there are fewer people to deal with. I don't trust myself with more than this. I felt the anger that had fueled me for years begin to shift, not disappearing but changing shape. Not forgiveness. I wasn't sure I would ever reach that, but perhaps understanding. I've spent 10 years wondering what I did wrong, I said, my voice breaking. What made you leave me there? Sabrina reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. You did nothing wrong, Ivy. You were too much in the best way. Too bright, too loving, too deserving of a whole mother. I wasn't ready to be what you needed. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. I pulled my essay from my bag and placed it on the table between us.
I wrote this, I said, about that day.
About everything after. May I keep it? She asked hesitantly. I nodded, standing up. I'd said what I needed to say, heard what I needed to hear. It wasn't closure exactly, but it was something. A truth I could build on. Goodbye, Sabrina, I said, placing money on the table for the coffee. Ivy, she called as I reached the door. Wait. She hurried to the counter and spoke briefly to the manager, who nodded and disappeared into the back. He returned with a cardboard box, which Sabrina brought to me. Mike's been keeping this for me, she explained, in case you ever came looking. Inside the box were drawings, dozens of them, crayon masterpieces from my childhood, each one carefully preserved. Pictures of houses with smiling stick figures, rainbows, butterflies. My name printed in wobbly letters at the bottom of each page. You kept these? I asked, my throat tight. I couldn't keep you, she said softly. but I kept every piece of you I could. I took the box and walked out without looking back. In my car, I sat for a long time looking at the drawings. Evidence that I had once been loved, however imperfectly. As I drove away from that town, from Sabrina, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed, some wounds never fully heal, but freed from the weight of not knowing. She hadn't left because I wasn't enough. She left because she wasn't enough in her own eyes. And that was a truth I could live with. "You're sure about this?" Declan asked, studying the manuscript on the table between us. At 25, we'd both come a long way from the kids we'd been. Declan was finishing law school, focusing on family law and child advocacy. I had my degree in psychology and a job at a youth center, working with kids in foster care. "I'm sure," I said, running my fingers over the title page. Vanished, what she left behind. My memoir had started as therapy, a way to process everything that happened since that day at the rest stop. But somewhere along the way, it had become something more, a message to others who'd been left behind. "The publisher wants to know if you're keeping the first chapter as is," Declan said, flipping to the opening page. I nodded, reading the words I knew by heart. We were driving to Grandma's. Mom smiled and said, "Hurry, sweetie. We'll wait right here." It had taken me years to be able to write those words without crying. Now they were just the beginning of a story that was entirely mine to tell. Dad and Rachel had been my biggest supporters through the writing process. "This isn't just your healing," Rachel had said. "It's going to help so many others." The book was published on a Tuesday in April. By Thursday, it had hit the regional bestseller list. By the following week, I was getting emails from readers across the country, people who'd been abandoned, people who'd done the abandoning, people who worked with children caught in the aftermath. A month after publication, I was invited to speak at a youth shelter in Nashville. Standing at the podium, looking out at the faces of children and teens who'd been left behind in various ways, I felt a circle closing. "Abandonment isn't the end of your story," I told them. "It's a terrible, painful chapter. But it doesn't get to define the rest of the book." After the talk, a girl with sad eyes and messy braids approached me hesitantly. "My mom left me too," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "She said she was going to the store. That was 2 years ago." I knelt down to her level, seeing my own childhood pain reflected in her face. "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said. "But I want you to know something important. You're not the only one." She nodded, her small shoulders relaxing slightly as I hugged her. As she walked away, I realized that this, connecting with others who understood, was the purpose that had emerged from my pain. The book tour took me across the country, to shelters and schools and therapy centers. And finally back to Tennessee, to that same rest stop that had changed everything. It looked different now, renovated, modernized, with a small coffee shop where the vending machines had been. But the bench outside was the same, or at least similar enough to the one where I'd sat waiting for a van that never returned. I placed a copy of my book beneath it, wedging it carefully against the metal leg. A silent message to anyone who might need it. You're not forgotten. That evening, I drove to Burlington, to the house that had become home. Dad and Rachel were waiting on the porch, little Jonah toddling between them on unsteady legs. My baby brother, adopted 2 years ago, had none of my blood but all of my heart. "How was it?" Dad asked as I climbed the steps. "Going back there?" "Healing," I said, scooping up Jonah when he reached for me. "Like closing a door that's been open too long." On my desk upstairs sat a new family photo. Dad, Rachel, Jonah, and me at his first birthday party. None of the tension or uncertainty that had marked my childhood photos. Just joy, simple and unguarded. Beside it was a stack of letters from readers, and my laptop open to a draft of my next book, a guide for those working with abandoned children, drawing on both my personal experience and my professional training. I hadn't heard from Sabrina since that night in the diner. I didn't know if she'd read my book or if she ever would. In the end, it didn't matter. Her chapter in my life had been written. The rest of the story belonged to me. As I settled into my chair and began to type, I thought about that 8-year-old girl, standing in a rest stop parking lot, watching her world drive away. She couldn't have imagined this future, this strength, this purpose, this peace. She left me at a rest stop. But I didn't stay there. I walked away, story in hand. Have you ever wondered what scars you carry from those who are meant to protect you? If Ivy's journey touched something in you, like this video, subscribe for more stories of survival, and remember, your worst chapter doesn't have to be your ending.